ॐ भूर्भुवः स्वः तत्सवितुर्वरेण्यं भर्गोदेवस्य धीमहि धियो यो नः प्रचोदयात्. ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः. Namaste, my dear friends. This is video number 9 on Viveka Chudamani of Adi Sankaracharya. This video starts with verse number 106. Infinite love the self. आत्मार्थ तवेन ही प्रेयान्विषयो न स्वतः प्रिय स्वतः एव ही सर्वेशम आत्मा प्रियतमो यतः तत् आत्मा सदानंदो नाशय दुखम कदाचन. Sense objects are pleasure giving only because of the self which manifest through them and not independently, for the self is by its very nature the most beloved of all. The self therefore is ever blissful and can never suffer any grief or misery. The sense objects of the world are pleasurable, no doubt, but only when they are illumined by the Atma, the life. Things are pleasurable only when I am alive. If I am dead, nothing is pleasurable. A thing in itself has no joy. The happiness that we seem to gain from the objects outside is in fact due to the nature of the Atma, which is happiness itself. The most enjoyable thing in every one of us is our own Atma. A man learning that his house is on fire runs to the house. When he comes to know that his only child is sleeping inside the house, he announces a large cash award for whoever will go and bring the child out to safety. When there is no response, he increases the sum of his award and at last he offers all his wealth for his child. But he himself does not risk the blazing fire and the burning rafters to bring the child out. This is because he loves himself more than anything else, his wealth and even his own child. The wife is dear to a man not for the sake of the wife but for the sake of the self. Man loves himself only. His attitude universally is so long as you contribute to my happiness, I love you. When a father chides his son and asks him to get out of his house, he only means to say, you are bringing more sorrow to me. Therefore, I do not want you in the house. The Atma at all times is indeed blissful, Sadananda. Never is there any sorrow in the self. When I have a Vasana for smoking, the agitations created in my mind due to that Vasana are temporarily quietened by smoking, and therefore I say I feel happy when I smoke. I foolishly consider that the happiness is in the cigarette and I run after such objects of pleasure in order to repeat the experience of happiness. A dog gnawing at a bone enjoys it more and more not because there is any meat on it. It is because the sharp ends of the bone scratching its lips, tongue, and inner mouth, draws out its own blood. The dog sucks it and feels that the enjoyment is in the bone. Thereafter, its mouth gets lacerated and it cannot eat for days together. Again, a camel often runs after a kind of thorny grass. The sharp grass cuts the mouth of the camel and it enjoys its own blood. The result is that its mouth gets scratched and it cannot eat for months afterwards. That's why the drivers prevent their camels from running after this particular kind of desert grass. Similarly, the human mind runs after sense objects like the dog after the dry bone. In fact, the joy content is not in the object, it is the consciousness, the Atma, the pure bliss of the self arising in us when the object is acquired and the mental agitation for that object ceases. You may consider a thing to be pleasant, but if it does not bring me an expansion of myself, I would not consider it to so. The great joy of the self is not readily available because of mental agitations at all times. These become, as it were, a wall between the happiness which is inherent in the self and the world outside. The acquisition of a desired object and the disturbances created by the desire and the light of consciousness beams out from behind the mind. In our lack of discrimination, we understand that the joy is in the object skewed. In fact, the joy is not in the object at all, but it makes me joyful if it brings me a contact with myself. It is only because of the Atma, the self, that each one of us acts out for himself the maximum joy. Universally, everybody wants joy, but nobody seems to know where exactly is the source of happiness. Hence, everyone runs after sense objects. Here, the teacher is asking us to pause for a moment and to reflect upon the location of the fountainhead of joy. Indeed, the Atma is of the nature of bliss and beatitude, and there is not even a trace of sorrow ever to veil the face of the Atma. Verse number 107. You युत सुसुप्तौ निर्विषय आत्मा आनंद अनुभूयते श्रुति प्रत्यक्षमेति ह्यमनुमानं च जागर्ति. Scriptural declarations, direct experience, tradition, and inference clearly say that in deep sleep we experience the bliss of the Atma independent of sense objects. In the state of deep sleep, where there are no objects, the joy experienced is the bliss of the self. We are not able to experience this joy during deep sleep because at that moment we are in a state of non apprehension. All that we experience at that moment is the absence of all sorrows. Sorrows are created by the sense organs, the mind, and the intellect. These equipments are not available in deep sleep. Hence, the Sorrows that could be created by them are absent. There is a common experience of happiness by everyone, even though there are no objects. Objectless awareness is the nature of Brahma. In deep sleep, objectlessness is there, but there is no awareness of the divine. The equipments of the body, mind, and intellect do not function in deep sleep, and at that time we burrow into our vasanas. Though the equipments of experience have been left behind, we are in the causal body, avidya. Avidya. That is why we are not able to experience that Om, the pure self, is. The absence of sorrow, which is experienced then, is called joy. This joy experienced during deep sleep is not because of the pillow, nor the cool atmosphere, nor the achievements of yesterday. It is Atmananda. The Srutis declare so. It is also evident that such is the direct experience of all people. It has become a tradition among men to accept it. It can also be ascertained by observation and inference, anumana. All this evidence compels us to accept that the joy experienced during the deep sleep state is nothing but the distant splendor of pure consciousness and its spotless brilliance. Before I slept, I was a miserable creature. When I woke up, I found myself equally miserable. But after I slept and before I awoke, I had no miseries and I was in a state of happiness. This joy was disturbed when the equipments of the body, mind, and intellect came into play. Thus, it is established through the words of the scriptures, through direct perception, through tradition, and through inference that joy is not in the objects outside, but it is only in the self within us. So far, the gross body, the subtle body, and the pranas have been described, and it has been said that there are these are the vestures of the Atma. Now the causal body is being explained. In Atam Bodha, it is described as the indescribable, beginningless ignorance of the spiritual essence. The causal body is beginningless, meaning beyond the pale of time. It is also non apprehension, the cause because of which all misapprehensions arise. When a post is not seen as a post, the misapprehension that it is a ghost arises. Non apprehensions of reality gives rise to misapprehension of the same. When truth is known, all misapprehensions end. The cause for all misapprehensions is not apprehension. All misapprehensions, I am the body, I am the mind, I am the intellect, arise out of some cause. This cause is called the causal body. The non-apprehension of reality is constituted of vasanas. The causal body is also called avidya. Nescience, lack of wisdom, lack of correct apprehension, maya, and lack of knowledge are all the various names of the same dark, dreary state of non-apprehension. It is called differently by different acharyas, when they used it in different contexts. Now the causal body is being described through verse number 108, 9 and 110. Maya pointed out. Stanza number 108. अव्यक्त नामनी परमेश शक्ति रणाद्य विद्या त्रिगुणात्मिका परा कार्या अनुमेया सुधीयैव माया यया जगत सर्वमिदं प्रसूयते. Nescience avidya or maya is also called the unmanifest and is the power of the Lord. It is without beginning. It comprises the three gunas and is superior to their effects. It is to be inferred only by one who has a clear intellect from the effects it produces. It is this avidya which projects the entire universe. One of the powers of the omnipotent Lord Parameshwara is the power to delude himself. This power divine is called the unmanifest and is the causal body. The Lord can play through any of his powers, the power to discriminate, Jnana Shakti, the power to desire, Ichha Shakti, or the power to strive, Kriya Shakti. All are his powers divine. This unmanifest power is otherwise called nescience, avidya. It is a solid mass of ignorance. In deep sleep, one experiences only one thing: I do not know. I don't know is the one's nature in deep sleep. This substance of deep sleep falls under the influence of three gunas: sattva, rajas, and tamas. Sattva, rajas, and tamas are three climatic conditions, as it were, under which thought functions. From these alone, various manifestations arise. This Maya Shakti, consisting of the three gunas, is beyond sense perception's pra. Only its effect can be perceived, just as we do not know what electricity is except through its manifestation. When a particular tendency manifests in an individual, then only can it be said that his vasanas are of a particular type. Hence, from the effects only, Maya Shakti can be inferred by those who have the necessary subtle intellect. This finite, mortal, ever changing world that we see around us is born out of Maya alone. Due to the non apprehension of reality, man recognizes the world of objects, emotions, and thoughts. Through the body, mind, and intellect, he contacts the world and creates more and more vasanas. These vasanas make one act more and more, and in the end, man becomes cocooned in them and gains permanently for himself the sense of his separate individuality, the Jiva Bhava. All these are created by this avidya, this non apprehension of reality. Avidya is the vasanas in the microcosm. The avidya of all individuals put together is its macrocosmic form and is called Maya. This is the vehicle of the Supreme when he functions as Isvara. When the Supreme functions through the Vasanas or Avidya microcosmic Maya, it becomes the Jiva, the individual ego. When the Supreme functions through macrocosmic avidya maya, he is Isvara. Each individual creates his own world around himself, due to his ignorance, avidya. Through his mind, the sum of each one's world put together is the total world which we call the universe, the Jagat. Therefore, the total world, the universe is created by the total mind when expressing through the total vasanas, otherwise called Maya. Thus, the supreme functioning through total avidya is God, Isvara, and the supreme expressing through the total mind is the creator, Brahmaji, who creates the universe. From the above, it becomes clear that the question, is there a God, is as foolish as one asking, have I a father? The very fact that you exist is enough proof that you must have had a father. Without a father, you cannot be, even if that father be unknown. Without a cause, an effect can never arise. Stanza number 109. संन्यापे संन्याप्यु भय आत्मिका नो भिन्यापे भिन्याप्यु भया आत्मिका नो संगापने अंगा ह्यूम यात्मिका नो महा अद्भुता निर्वचनीय रूपा. It, Maya, is neither existent nor non-existent, nor both, neither same nor different, nor both, neither made up of parts nor whole, not both. Most wonderful it is and beyond description in words. This avidya cannot be said to have a separate existence from Brahma, nor can it be said that it exists not, because we are both enjoying and suffering it. It cannot also be said that it exists as well as does not exist, because a non existent thing can never become existent, nor can an existent thing express as non existent. We cannot say that the ghost in the post exists, nor can we say it exists not, because we sweat and perspire when we see it. To say that it exists as well as exists not is a clumsy contradiction in terms. Also, it cannot be said that this great Maya exists and is other than Brahma, because Brahma is one without a second. To say that this Maya is with the Lord as well as without the Lord is again a contradiction in terms. We cannot say that the ghost came from the post at any time. Neither can we say it is with parts and without parts, because it is again a contradiction that cancels itself and becomes utterly meaningless. For ignorance can never be known. Then what is this avidya? All that we can say about it is that it is a great wonder. It can only be said to be indescribable, anirvachaniya. There is wonder when the intellect is not able to comprehend a thing, anything that I see, and my intellect cannot explain, I say, is a wonder. The more I think about this avidya, the more my intellect fails, because this avidya is the very cause for the intellect. The intellect cannot comprehend its own cause because it is the child born out of Maya, and a child cannot go back to look for the womb. This Maya, when it manifests, becomes the intellect. Therefore, the intellect cannot comprehend the unmanifest, which is its own cause. The effect cannot by itself comprehend its own cause. Maya is also called a delusion, and a delusion can never be explained. There cannot be a biography of the ghost I saw on the post, nor can I grow rich by extracting the silver from the mother of pearl. This Maya Shakti, we can only say, is an indescribable, mighty, inscrutable power of the Lord. Strange, for by his own inscrutable power, a person deludes himself and says, tell me, what is this power? Where is it? Where is it? Brahmin boy one day went to meet his friends in a student's hostel. That being the festival day of Holi, the boy's friends were preparing Thandai, a cool drink in which a bit of opium is also added. In order to tease him, they gave him a strong dose of the opium drink. The boy, not being used to it, gulped it down, somehow unable to refuse his friend's offer. As the opium started having effect on him, he thought of going home. He felt that he could not go alone, so he started shouting, take me home, take me home. Now he was under the full influence of the intoxicant and he shouted even more loudly, take me home, take me home. Then one of his friends took pity on him. He led him home and made him lie down on his bed, not realizing where he was. The boy continued shouting, take me home. Hearing his meaningless shouts, his parents rushed to his bedside. They tried to tell him that he was already at home, but the boy would not stop his blabbering. Suspecting some mischief, the father questioned his friend and found out that he was under the intoxicating influence of opium. He then fetched some buttermilk, which is an antidote, and made him drink it. When he had drunk the buttermilk, the boy in time started coming to his senses, but he continued shouting, take me home. After some time, he became fully conscious that he was reclining in his own bed, shouting, take me home. In a flash, he realized how foolish he was, that there was no need for him to shout, for he was already home. So he stopped shouting and thereafter slept peacefully. Similarly, we at the moment under the influence of the opium of avidya, non-apprehension of reality, consider ourselves to be the body, mind, intellect, and are supremely confused by the objects perceived, emotions felt, and thoughts entertained. We cry out, O Lord, O Teacher, take me home, give me peace, make me happy, take you where? Give you what? In reality, you are the self, but due to avidya, you live and behave as though you are an ego. Take me to myself, give me my own self. You are already in Om, which is your home. Your home is really Om. Never were you out of Om. Your home, Hari Om. You ask, then why am I suffering? All on account of this opium, the avidya, which is within you. The Guru, the teacher, will give you the buttermilk of the study of the Shastras, spiritual discipline, etc. All these for what? To take you home, which is Om, where you already are. Lack of correct thinking produces misconceptions. Think rightly, all misery will end. The text that teaches us to think correctly and discriminate properly is the Viveka Chudamani, the crushed jewel of discrimination. Stanza number 110. Shuddhadve Brahm Vivo Bodhanashya Sharp Bharmo Rajo Vivekto Yatha Rajtamah Satvamiti Parsiddha Gunast Diya Parthite Sabkarye. By realization of the pure non-dual Brahma, Maya can be destroyed just as the illusion of the snake is removed. By the discriminative knowledge of the rope, its gunas are Rajas, Tamas and Sattva, distinguished by their respective functions. The mighty power of delusion can be destroyed through the direct experience of the pure Brahma, the one without a second, just as the illusion of the serpent can be destroyed by the knowledge of the rope, which is the reality behind the delusion. When the non-apprehension of the real substratum and the objects of illusory perceptions created by it called misapprehensions also end. When the reality, the Brahma, is realized, the confusions that I am the body, I am the mind, I am the intellect also end, just as the illusory serpent disappears totally on cognition of the rope. This great avidya or non-apprehension has sattva, rajas and tamas as its gunas or properties. They are so named after their functions. The functions of Maya Shakti fall under these three kinds. The gunas determine the landscapes of the mind and appear different, as in summer and winter the landscape appears different. What will be the individual landscape under the influence of gunas is described in the following verses. Rajoguna, nature and effect, stanza number 111 and 12. Stanza number 111. विक्षेप शक्ति रजस है क्रियात्मिका यतः प्रवृत्ति पश्यता पुराणी रागदयोश्या प्रभवन्ति नित्यं दुखादयो ये मनसो विकारा. Rajas has projecting power, vikshipa shakti. Activity is its very nature. From it, the initial flow of activity has originated. From it, mental modifications such as attachment and grief are also continuously produced. The Rajas attitude of Maya creates the agitations of the mind vikshepa. Maya expressed at the mental level manifest in the form of mental agitations. The Maya which creates restlessness in the mind is called Rajoguna, from which all activities are born. When the mind is active, we act in the world outside. When the mind is quiet, all actions end. During deep sleep, the mind is at rest and is calm, therefore, no activity is taking place. Activities are only possible when the mind is active. A mental picture exists before every activity. Our association with objects and beings creates more and more attachment. We see a possibility until it becomes an agitation. Then desires and passions arise in the mind. To satisfy them, man has to act in the world outside. for it takes less exertion to yield to them than to fight them. From this activity alone, the mind's various attitudes are born. Thus, the mind gains its experiences of joys and sorrows. The nature of avidya, when expressed in a given personality, is called rajoguna. Rajoguna creates agitations in the mind. Due to these mental agitations, objectively we act in the world and subjectively we experience desires, passions, lust and consequently joys and sorrows. Stanza number 112. Kamah krodho lobh dammadusaya हंकार ऐसा मित्सराध्यास्तुग घोरा धर्म एतेज राजसा पुम विवर्ति यस्मा देशा तदर्जो बंध हेतु desire, anger, greed, hypocrisy, arrogance, jealousy, egoism, envy, etc. These are the dreadful attributes of Rajas from which the worldly tendencies of man are produced. Rajas is therefore the cause of bondage in life. Objectively, all actions arise out of the Rajoguna aspect of Maya. Reactions arising subjectively in the human personality are explained in these words. Desire, anger, avarice, hypocrisy, arrogance, jealousy, egoism, envy, etc. All of them manifest because of Rajoguna. They are the lower types of emotions created by Rajoguna in the psychological layer of the personality. These reactions created by the agitations of the mind are terrible because they multiply the agitations and man gets totally shackled by them. Since all worldly activities arise from Rajoguna, it is said to cause all bondages in life. For under the forces of Rajas, man becomes limited by his own lower impulses. Rajas generates agitations, vikshepa, and these very agitations of the mind veil avarna, the self in us. When a Rajasic man gets exhausted due to his own overexertion, he gets tired and feels sleepy, a state when he is about to enter tamas. That is, Rajas must necessarily lapse into tamas. Once the higher awareness is veiled, we are apt to act foolishly and get more and more entangled in the mad pursuit of objects of pleasure. Tamoguna, nature and effects. Stanza number 113, 114, 115 and 116. First 113. ऐसा व्यक्तिर्नाम तमोगुणस्य शक्तिर्यया वस्तवैभासते अन्यथा शेषा निदानं पुरुषस्य संस्यर्ते विक्षेप शक्ति परवनस्य हेतु. The veiling power, avirti, is the power of tamas which makes things appear to be other than what they actually are. It causes man's repeated transmigration and initiates the action of the projecting power vikshepa. Maya in its tamoguna nature acts in our personality as the power of veiling, by which reality is veiled from our cognition and things are observed as something other than what they actually are. Tamas veils reality and Rajas creates agitations in the mind. As the result of a combination of these two, we see things which are not really there. Things as they are veiled by tamas, and the mind projects its imaginations upon them. Objects are not perceived in their right perspective when the inner personality is poisoned by rajas and tamas. This tamas is the springboard for man's repeated transmigration. Considering myself to be the body, the mind, and the intellect, I function in the world of objects, emotions, and thoughts, creating more and more vasanas for myself. In order to exhaust these vasanas, I must necessarily search for another physical body when the present one drops off. The cycle of birth and death goes on until all the vasanas have been exhausted. All this is only because reality is not clearly apprehended. Reality is veiled because of tamas. This tamasic aspect of Maya is actually the cause for all the agitations of the mind. So far, it has been described how man comes to suffer the precautions of the world. The tamasic aspect of Maya veils the intellect, and so the intellect cannot have the right judgment of things. When the intellect is veiled by tamas, the mind, under the influence of rajas, projects a wrong idea of things perceived by the sense organs. The individual then gets excited. When the rope is not recognized as a rope, man suffers from the misconceptions projected by his own mind that it is a serpent. Similarly, due to the tamas in me, I am not able subjectively to realize the nature of Brahma, the Atma in me. In its place, I recognize the subject object world of experiences caused by the rajas in me. Not only do I not know that I am the self, the Atma, but in its place I experience the limitations of the equipment of the body, mind, and intellect and their experiences. So, Maya plays in two ways, through her Avarna Shakti veiling power and through her Viksipa Shakti projecting power, which are due to Tamas and Rajas respectively. Stanza number 114. Pragyan प्रज्ञावानपि पंडितोऽपि चतुरोऽपि अत्यंत सूक्ष्मार्थदृग् व्यालिड्य सत्मसा निवेत्ति बहुधा संबोधितोऽपि सपुटं भ्रान्तारोपितमेव साधु कलयत्ते आलम्बते नद्गुणान् हन्तासो प्रबला दुरन्त तमसः शक्ति महतवर्ती. Even the wise and the learned and those who are proficient in the vision of the supremely subtle meaning of the scriptures are overpowered by tamas and cannot comprehend truth, even though it is clearly explained in various ways. They considered as real what is simply superimposed by delusion and attach themselves to its effects. Alas, how powerful is the veiling power of dire tamas! Even a man who is very clever, exceedingly capable of seeing the subtle meaning of things, and endowed with great intelligence and genius, is overpowered by the influence of tamas and becomes incapable of understanding reality, though it is clearly explained in different ways with many references and examples. Not only does he not understand truth, but he also insists that what has been falsely projected by him alone is real. Even after reading all the Upanishads, he says that the existence in the body, mind, and intellect and their activities of perceiving, feeling, and thinking constitute the only reality. His intellect cannot comprehend the truth because of the thickness of tamas and has come to cover it. By insisting upon his projections alone as truth, he becomes victimized by their properties. When the properties of his projected misconceptions change, he too changes. When the body is a little ill, he says, I am ill. If the mind is worried, he complains, I am worried. Thus, the gunas of the body, mind, and intellect become his gunas. Alas, this endless tamas is very powerful. The tamasic aspect of Maya has such a mighty power that even a brilliant intellect, when under the influence of tamas, cannot understand the reality, though it is pointed out in a thousand clear ways by the Shastras. Stanza number 115. अभावना व विपरीत भावना संभावना विपर्तिपत्तिरस्या संसर्गयुक्तम न विमुचन्ति ध्रुवम विक्षेप शक्ति अक्षेपयत जस्रम. Absence of correct judgment or contrary judgment, lack of definite belief and doubt. Certainly, these never leave one who has any connection with this wailing power. Also, the projecting power gives endless trouble. Tamas is connected with number one, absence of right judgment. Abhavana, two, contrary judgment. Viparita bhavna, 3. Want of definite belief in the existence of a thing even though there may be a vague notion of it. Asambhavana. And fourth, doubt. Vipartapatti. As long as there is tamas, these are present. They are all effects of influence of tamas in one's personality. When the intellect is veiled, Rajas comes to play its pranks. The mind starts projecting ceaselessly and the individual suffers. Stanza number 116. अज्ञान माल अस्य जड़ तब निद्रा प्रमाद मूढ़त्व मुखास्तो तमो गुणा एतई प्रयुक्तो नहीं वित्ति किंचि निद्रालो वत्स संभव देव तिष्ठति. Ignorance, laziness, dullness, sleep, inadvertence, stupidity, etc. are the attributes of tamas. One tied up with these cannot comprehend anything, but remains like one asleep or like a stump of wood or a block of stone. Ignorance of reality, inability to act rightly, incapacity to comprehend properly, excessive sleep, doing things for the sake of doing them, colossal stupidity, and all other attributes are the effects of tamoguna. When one is under the influence of tamoguna, the above qualities are seen in him. These defects in the functioning of the personality layers in us are like parasitic growths on the intellect which make it dull and inert. Man with such a maladjusted intellect moves in the world as though asleep and lives like an inert telegraph post, a dead pillar, or an insentient statue. It is all due to the manifestations of concentrated tamas in the bosom of the individual. Sattva guna, nature and effects. Stanza number 117, 118 and 119. Stanza number 117. Sattvam Vishuddham Jalvatyathaphi Tabhyam Militva Sharnay Kalpate Yatratam Bim Pratibimbit San Prakasitrik Ivakhilam Jadam. Pure sattva is like clear water, yet in combination with rajas and tamas, it provides for transmigration. But when the light of the self gets reflected in sattva alone, then like the sun, it reveals the entire world of matter. Having explained Rajoguna and Tamoguna, Sankara now gives an explanation of Sattva Guna. Sattva is ever pure, like water. Like water, it can get mixed up with many things, but not as a compound of its own nature. Water as water is ever pure. When we say dirty water, we mean that a sample of pure water has something other than it in it. When we say stinking water and muddy water, we mean a specimen of pure water in which the stink and the mud are held in suspension. If the sink if the stink and the dirt are removed, the water again becomes pure. Similarly, sattva is always present even in a tamasic man. When pure sattva in an individual is in conjunction with rajas and tamas, it becomes the cause for his transmigration. If he is in pure sattva, that is, if he has eliminated rajas and tamas, then for him there can be no transmigration. Only when sattva is muddled with rajoguna and tamoguna does it cause transmigration. When there is pure sattva, the intellect works steadily. There is no wailing and there are no agitations. The mind then becomes steady in utter meditation. It is face to face with divinity, with reality. When this state is called, when this state is veiled by tamas and disturbed by rajas, the mind starts seeing things other than reality. The body, mind, and intellect turned towards objects, emotions, and thoughts create vasanas. To exhaust these vasanas, fresh bodies have to be taken. This going and coming samsara of the individuality from one equipment to another, from one time to another, from one place to another is called transmigration. When the consciousness gets reflected in the sattva mode of the mind, it illumines the inert, insentient world around just as the sun illumines them during the day. The light of the sun itself is imperceptible. If there is light on this book and if it is coming from the window, there must be light between the window and this book. This light between the window and the book cannot be perceived. Light itself is imperceptible. When it falls on an object and gets reflected, the reflected light alone can be seen. The Atma cannot see anything, nor know any object, nor illumine anything, because in Brahma there is nothing for it to illumine. It is one without a second. We generally recognize the things in the world with our intelligence. Intelligence is the light of consciousness reflected in the intellect. Therefore, when the intellect is agitated, the intelligence is less. Since the reflecting surface is not steady, the reflection of consciousness gets shaky and so its brilliance becomes dimmed. If the reflecting surface is unclean, the reflected beam must be dim. When the intellect is under the influence of tamas, it is rendered dull, as when he is under chloroform. He cannot understand anything within or without him. Therefore, when rajas and tamas are mixed with sattva, there is little intelligence in an individual. But when rajas and tamas are reduced in one's personality, the proportion of sattva increases, the light of consciousness reflected in the intellect becomes more and more clear. Thus, out of the stupid personality of today, a great brilliance of intelligence can be produced when the personality gets purified. Upasana, japa, and meditation and other such spiritual disciplines are all meant for the purification of the personality. When the mind becomes more and more sattvic, it starts apprehending things it could not apprehend before. By such spiritual practices, the mind becomes calm and the clarity of the light of consciousness reflecting in the intellect becomes more and more. Man's devotion to the higher and his burning aspiration for liberation becomes greater and greater, and noble virtues come to shine forth in him. As a result, one's capacity to apprehend things increases. This extra brilliant capacity is called intuition. In Sanskrit, it is called jnana chakshu, otherwise called the power of divine vision or revelation, trance experience. All these indicate a mind in a fully sattvic condition. The whole process is like an ascending spiral. It gathers momentum and carries itself. Consciousness being the same in all beings, the intelligence of individuals differ on account of the proportion of rajas and tamas functioning in their personality. Stanza number 118. मिश्रस्य सत्वस्य भवन्ति धर्मा सत्वे मान्नित्याद्या नियमा यमाद्या श्रद्धा च भक्तिश्च मुमुक्षुता च देवी च संपत्ति रस निवर्ति च. The characteristics of mixed sattva are under absence of pride, etc., niyama, yama, etc., and also faith, devotion, yearning for liberation, the divine tendencies, and a natural turning away from everything unreal. In the above verse, the consequences of the preponderance of sattva with the presence of rajas and tamas in the intellect have been explained. An individual is already on the path to realization of the proportion of rajas and tamas is very little, and the intellect is predominantly of a sattvic nature. Because of the predominance of sattva, the individual's yearning for liberation will be great. When this anxiety for liberation, for liberating one's personality increases, pride, etc., which belong to the nature of a rasic personality, will totally disappear from the seeker's heart. The qualities of a sattvic personality have been explained in the Gita. They are called the divine qualities. A man of sattvic temperament is divinely good. It is in the nature of such an individual to turn away from the unreal asannivirti and progress towards liberation. Fearlessness, purity of heart, steadfastness in the yoga of knowledge, alms giving, control of the senses, sacrifice, study of the shastras, austerity and straightforwardness, harmlessness, truth, absence of anger, renunciation, peacefulness, absence of crookedness, compassion to beings, uncovetousness, gentleness, modesty, absence of fickleness. This is from Gita. All the qualifications of a fit student, adhikari, are present in such an individual. The qualities leading to the supreme good, that is, absence of pride, etc., qualities that add tempo to the spiritual practices such as yama, niyama, etc., and the sixfold wealth consisting of sama, dhamma, etc., with sufficient devotion to the ideal are all the indications of mixed sattva guna, where rajas and tamas are less and sattva is preponderant. Stanza number 119. विशुद्ध सत्वस्य गुणः प्रसादः सब आत्मानुभूति परमा प्रशांति तृप्ति प्रहर्ष परमार्थ निष्ठा यया सदा आनंद रसम समर्चति. The characteristics of pure sattva are cheerfulness, the experience of one's own self, supreme peace, contentment, bliss, and constant devotion to the supreme self, by which the aspirant comes to enjoy everlasting bliss. When the last traces of dirt, rajas, and tamas are removed, the personality becomes completely pure. Such an inner equipment is full of uncontaminated sattva. When such a state is attained, the aspirant realizes the supreme self and gains everlasting bliss. It is everlasting because, having gained this state, no sorrow can ever affect a person. Some of the traits of this transcendental state of experience are indicated by some very choice expressions in this verse. Experience of one's own self, Savatmanubhuti, Rajas, the cause for all misapprehensions, and Tamas, the cause for non-apprehensions, are totally absent in pure Sattva. Therefore, the self is apprehended when the intellect becomes immaculately pure, supreme peace, Parama Prashanti. There is no rajas, the cause for agitations in that spiritual state of divine experience. When the self is apprehended, all agitations end. Hence, there can only be perfect peace, contentment, tripti. Because of the absence of all desires, the seeker feels a sense of supreme contentment. Presence of desire is the indication of a sense of incompleteness. Attainment of perfect peace must end all sense of incompleteness. This is the state of desirelessness, the state of perfection or godhood. Bliss, praharsha. This is not the bliss of ignorance but dynamic bliss of realization. This bliss springs from a source transcending all our non-concept of joys and sorrows, which ooze out from the filthy marshlands of our minds. Firm devotion to the Supreme Self, Paramatma Nishtha. Because of non-apprehension of reality, our individuality is entirely engaged in seeking its joys among the objects, emotions, and thoughts. Though the equipment of the body, mind, and intellect, when these equipments are transcendent, the objective and subjective worlds are no more. When the vasanas of rajas and tamas are removed, the ego rediscovers itself as the supreme reality and becomes one with it. Thereafter, there is no slipping back into the state of body identification. unwavering, steady, and deep devotion to the Supreme becomes natural to such a seeker. Thus, by making the intellect completely pure, the aspirant enjoys the essence of everlasting. Similar knowledge is gained from Gita. Gita chapter 13, stanza number 7 to 11. Humility, unpretensiousness, non-injury, forbearance, uprightness, service to the teacher, purity, steadiness, self-control, the renunciation of self, sense objects, and also absence of egoism, reflection on the evils of birth, death, old age, sickness, and pain, non attachment, non identification of self with son, wife, home, and the rest, and constant even mindedness in the occurrence of the desirable and the undesirable, unswerving devotion to me by the yoga of non separation, resort to sequestered places, sequestered places distant from the society of man, constant application to spiritual knowledge, understanding of the end of true knowledge. This is declared to be knowledge, and what is opposite to is ignorance. Sama, control of inner mind. Dama, control of the sense organs. Uparti, self withdrawal. Titiksha, capacity to suffer silently. The little pinpricks of life. Shraddha, deep faith. Samadhana, peace of mind. Gita chapter 15, stanza number 6. Nor does the sun shine there, nor the moon, nor fire, to which having gone they return not. That is my supreme abode. Gita chapter 13, stanza number 21. That which has been called unmanifest and imperishable has been described as the supreme goal. That is my highest state, having attained which there is no return. The perceiver, feels, thinker entity in us. So at this stage I conclude this video number 9, and video number 10 will start with the causal body, its nature, and it will start with stanza number 120. Thank you. Namaste.